Welcome to today's podcast episode, everyone. We've got a very exciting guest for you guys. For those of you just joining the podcast, we're E.N.G Media, and we specialize in helping software and technology companies scale their revenue. But without further ado, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm really excited to dive into some of the stuff that you guys are working on at Paren.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Maybe let's just start by you giving myself and the audience just a brief overview of really what your guys' core area of focuses really are.
So at Paren, we capture all different types of data in the EV charging space. And typically in the public EV charging space, focused on what we call fast charging. So the ability to charge on a trip or charge your car relatively very quickly. So we are working towards what we call our real-time API, which is intended to take all of our analytics and all of our reliability calculations and bring that into the vehicle navigation system. So what we're really working towards is every public charging use is a successful first-time plug-in success for EV drivers. So that's what we're working towards. As we build all that up, we've got a treasure trove of data that we share with our clients, and our clients make really interesting use cases. Have interesting use cases for how to use this data in a variety of different ways.
No, that is very interesting as well. And out of curiosity, like what was your background kind of leading up to this point of you starting Paren? I guess have you had like a background in the EV charging space specifically in technology?
I had no background in technology, but not in the EV charging software space. I spent the majority of my career building large enterprise applications. My last role was with IBM.
Okay.
And the last project I worked on really was a gigantic project where we led the modernization of the ACH system, which is the automatic clearinghouse, which is how money moves throughout the US. We did that for the Federal Reserve, which is effectively the government's national bank, right? We don't necessarily call it that, but it's the right way to look at it. So when I left that project, we were successful. We had successfully deployed it and been here about a year. When I left IBM, it was moving around $3 trillion a month. So that's how your paycheck flows through from your company to your bank. Effectively, it goes through that system. So it's how people's Social Security checks get paid. It's how the government pays money to anybody plus business to business. And so I actually checked on this a few months ago, and it's now moving $5 trillion a month.
Oh my goodness.
And this was just a massive project. Lots and lots of data, lots of high performant, highly accessible. It's got to work 24/7. And if it goes down, it effectively is the front page story on CNN and potentially impacts the stock market. So no pressure, but we got it done. Most of my gray hair is from that project, but we got it done. And so when I left IBM, looking for something else to do, and really I'd been driving EVs for a long time, and so I just wanted to look and see what I could do in that space. How could I leverage my software development, my software leadership experience with this love of the EV space. And really what I did was just sat down and listened and read and learned from a bunch of really, really smart people. Along the way, this was back in 2022, there was this woman named Chelsea Sexton, and she's fairly big in the EV space. She works for the government loan programming office today. But she said there's shockingly little data in this space. And I said, I know EVs, I know data. How can I put this together? So I started putting together a process and a plan for measuring the reliability of EV charging stations from a driver's perspective, not for the companies that put them in place, not for the companies that own them, but for the drivers, asking really one question, which is, can I charge? So I built this whole software platform with a little company I called EV Session. And from there, I met a whole bunch of really interesting people, including my co-founder, and we met through a third party, and we instantly bonded and decided to join forces. I effectively merged my company into his, which was called Paren, and that's kind of the start of the story where we are today as a venture-backed software startup that is helping to change the EV charging space from the driver's perspective.
I love that. I love how you took kind of your data-driven approach to the EV space along with your technical expertise from your experience at IBM in itself. And I know that you guys are publishing reports and kind of bridging that gap between data and the EV space specifically. So I seen on your guys' website that for Q2, you shared a few new insights in relation to like the EV industry and kind of what you guys are seeing in the data itself. Would you be at liberty maybe to speak to what some of those insights really are and what you guys are uncovering?
Sure. And that data, we actually make that report publicly available.
Nice.
So again, we're sitting on a treasure trove of data, and we thought from a branding perspective, what if we came out with a regular report?
Yeah.
Quarterly, currently, it may go to yearly, it may go to, we'll figure out the right cadence for it, but we call it the state of the industry, the state of the EV charging industry report. And so for this quarter, which was Q2 ending in June, was our second iteration of the report. And we're
Right.
really pleased with the response that we have gotten from that. Real quick story. I was sitting at a meeting recently, and the gentleman next to me had a stack of papers, and he saw my shirt, and he reached into the stack of papers and he said, "Is this you?" And he pulled out a printout of our report.
Oh, wow.
And that made my day. But because we do this, out of partially service to the industry, partially for brand recognition,
Yeah.
and we really got some interesting, have some interesting insights this quarter.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's happened over the last year with the introduction of the new administration is a pushback on some of the EV initiatives that were started before.
Mhm.
And what everyone thought is that's going to slow down the whole EV approach. From a charging perspective, the second quarter of 2025 was the biggest quarter that we've had to date with respect to putting in new charger stations, putting in new larger charging stations, and really the growth of that charging industry.
Wow.
How we track it, the way we track it, we're able to kind of come up with some really interesting insights that we believe that this approach is actually now starting to, after years, starting to falling behind. It's now getting ahead of the curve. So we have seen in our data that certain areas of the country actually have more charging than they need today. And you want that to be ahead, right? You don't want to be waiting in line at a charger. California is not one of those places where the build out is ahead of the vehicles in operation. But in other parts of the country, that's absolutely the case with some of the build out that's happened in Q1 and mostly in Q2 of this year. So that was one of our first key insights. The second insight is really looking at where the growth areas are for EV charging across the country. And what we see on average, we've seen a 3 to 5% growth rate in public use of EV charging across the nation. Again, it's higher in California than it is in other areas, but we're seeing areas like Texas and Florida, and even some of the bigger western states like Montana and Wyoming really get to see increases in how the public charging is used in those states.
Yeah.
And that really says to me that people are now more comfortable with the growth of the infrastructure. They're now more comfortable, A, to purchase EVs, and B, to take those EVs on those long road trips that typically require the use of public charging.
100%. And I appreciate you sharing those insights on our podcast. It's interesting to hear that like the overall use of EVs is kind of growing. And I know you guys take the stance of really from the consumers of like people who own electric vehicles. I know I own a Tesla. I mentioned it to you before we started our podcast.
Right.
So you want to help people like me find chargers on these really long distance road trips. Whereas it's interesting to see the data is showing like certain parts of the country have more of that capability than really they need. And then there's other parts that are kind of lacking that as well. And so you guys are looking at all of that and trying to figure out how to really make that process, I guess, overall better. So I would love to highlight, again, if you can speak to it, maybe like a specific use case of an organization or a project that you've worked on where you guys have really been able to execute your mission from everything that you're seeing really with the data.
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting examples. So ride sharing is a big industry, right? It's big from an EV perspective. You see Uber and Lyft and others that are emphasizing the use of EVs as part of their corporate culture and really putting plans in place and programs in place so that more of their contracted drivers are going to go and use EVs. So they have a whole bunch of incentives in place. And one of the disincentives currently is the lack of reasonable public charging that those drivers can use. And what we've seen with some of our customers who are in that space is utilizing our data to find where those drivers are, where those where the lack of charging stations are. Maybe there's an existing stations there, but they might lack the amenities, or they might not have the best pricing, or they might not be located in the right place, too far off the highway, or there's only 2 chargers. There really should be 10 or 20, right? So what we've seen with the use of our data is companies servicing rideshare drivers to find and cite the best places to put those charging stations. Again, using our data to feed their sophisticated models that understand that. So that's one aspect, the sort of the private industry aspect. The other thing that we do, and I go out of my way to do this probably more than I should, but any qualified public or private institution, typically colleges, universities, that want to use pieces of our data for research projects, we provide that data to them for free.
Oh,
Maybe not the entire data set, maybe not years and years worth of history, but we provide some data set to them for free. And recently I had the pleasure of working with some sections of the government that purchased part of our data so that they could work with a university to model our data, specifically trying to look at what happens in the future, in an electrified future, when a hurricane comes on shore or when a tornado strikes a region. How do we respond to disasters, right? These are the kinds of things that government folks spend a lot of time thinking about, right? And some really smart data scientists kind of using our data to model what would happen in those scenarios. And I recently had an opportunity to see where they were in that process, and a bunch of PhD candidates just blowing my mind with the research that they've done.
that's right.
We've also given some of our pricing data to a university in Massachusetts that is working on trying to understand how pricing models impact the EV driver today and in the future.
Wow. Very, very, very.
So
Sounds
when you have a ton of data, we have like 140 columns in our data set that we provide. There's a ton of different data that folks use different pieces of it and can combine it with their own data sets in really, really interesting ways. That's one of my favorite parts, is to sit there with customers, either hopefully face to face, but most times over Zoom, and just watch what they're doing and watch what they've done. And that helps us kind of drive how we build our products going forward.
Yeah, I still think that there's such a big gap of understanding in the way that everything is kind of works, I guess, in the whole EV world. I think it's still fairly new. I know it sounds complex from my perspective as well, so I won't even try to have that conversation with you. But I would be curious to know as well. It sounds like you guys are working on a lot of awesome things, like with these private institutions. But then also, like, do you guys have any new initiatives maybe that you're rolling out in the next 12 months? Anything new that you're doing with the technology? Anything maybe that you haven't yet announced on social media or the website that we could bring up on this podcast?
Yeah, there's 2 key things. One is, I mentioned earlier that our ultimate goal is to have this real-time API that can sit on top of our data set.
Nice.
And that goal is really on track to be completed, not completed as first phase, completed at the end of this month. So literally we're like a week or 2 away in August of 2025 here of having that. And we actually have some interest. I can't go into too much depth, but we have some interest from folks in the vehicle space about how we can use this data in an attempt to really improve their customer experience, right? Because that's really what they're about. Auto manufacturers build cars and they want people to buy their cars, right? So it's all about that customer experience. And so that's really one of the areas where we're focused on right now. And so we've got that product coming out imminently. And then another thing that we're working on is like every company, we look to see, how AI can help us. And in this case, we're looking more at machine learning algorithms and how they can help us, primarily to help other businesses. So one of the other tools that we're working on is what we call competitive analysis and really competitive notification, real-time notifications. So imagine if you're a business and there's 6 different charging stations within 1 mile of yours, right? You would want to know right away, without going through a whole bunch of manual checking, and people do this today, right? You'd want to know right away when that price changes, right? Of one of your competitors, right? And that way you can decide whether you want to raise your price in tandem or lower it from a competitive perspective. The second aspect of that is you might see in real time that station A is down. And it's your highest competitive station. And for some reason it's down. Maybe it's regular maintenance, maybe parking lots flooded, a variety of different reasons. But you then could potentially do something to try to lure other folks to come to you.
Oh, wow.
to your station. But the other thing is, if you're in competitive situations, may say you're a convenience store and you've got 10 different sites. Why is site A performing better than site B? So site A is doing really well with its peers, but site B may not be. So what is site A doing better? Maybe it has better amenities. Maybe it has better pricing. Maybe it has better parking, more vehicles that use it closer to the exit ramp, a whole bunch of different factors. Why
Yeah.
is it behaving better? Charge point operators, the ability to see things that they can't see today. Typically, they have siloed data around their environment. We're giving them data around everyone that's their peers in that space,
Yeah.
in that location.
Very, very interesting. It is, I guess, intriguing to understand some of the business use cases of how you guys are looking to leverage that data, and then also use machine learning to, I guess, better understand and make correlations into like what you're seeing and help them make, I guess, educated decisions as well. And I know, at least from a marketing perspective, I'm always curious to know like how have you guys found it, bringing awareness to Paren, like your guys' software and everything that you guys are working on. Like, have you, I guess, network within the industry at like multiple different types of conferences and maybe virtually as well over social media? Or how have you been able to get, I guess, in front of your audience as a software company?
So we're less than a year and a half old as a business. Like we really formally started in March of 24. And so one of the probably the biggest marketing decision that we made is we actually acquired a business from the people associated with one of the LinkedIn's biggest EV influencers.
Oh,
And his name is Lauren McDonald. And so he joined us, and so he brought with us, a network of followers and people that trust him. And one of our biggest initiatives is building trust, not only in the data, but in ourselves as well. Lauren fit perfectly into that. So we spent the last year creating this brand. Like I said, that story I told him, when that CEO pulled out our report, right?
yeah.
That told me that story that we imagined 9 months ago of acquiring this business and starting to tell stories with our data, that we were
Uh,
actually having an impact and we were reaching the right people, right?
Absolutely.
And so we've been on, our data is valued, our opinions are valued by every national news press organization and EV blogging and digital media site, has featured our data, has featured us as influencers and people who understand this industry. We get calls daily from various variety of press folks that we leverage that. And we've used that ability to tell stories to basically build our brand, to the point where my data scientist is relatively new out of university. And so she was out meeting people at a party of one of her friends, and somebody there worked for an EV company, and you would think that someone in the trenches of an EV company wouldn't know who we are,
Right.
right? But he said, "Hey, I know. We've had some chats about you and your data, right?"
Oh, wow.
So we've made an impact by telling these stories.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome to hear about. I think that's every software company's dream, is to have people handing over, printed out, I guess, of the reports that they have on their website, printed out sheets and copies of it. So that is very, very awesome. And it's a unique marketing decision, I think, that you guys made early on. I haven't heard of that one before, but I'm glad to see that you are able to not only leverage the trust of, an influencer's audience in the EV space, but then also maintain it and have grown it from there, from publishing legit data and, I guess, doing your due diligence. So I appreciate you sharing those insights as well. And if there is anybody that wants to connect with you, Bill, or find out more about Paren, I guess outside of the website, what would be the best social media platform for really the audience to go and connect?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is really where we spend a lot of our time posting our insights, our data, our analysis, our previews. So you can find me at Bill Ferro on LinkedIn, and then Paren on LinkedIn as well. And so we're posting regularly about interesting topics that we find in the EV space, as well as how our data is showing different trends and analysis.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include links in the description of the video to your guys' social media, the website, as well. And so I highly recommend that you guys do go check out all the awesome stuff that Bill and Perrin are really working on. But I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much again for coming on our show today and sharing your insights and really for your time as well.
Yeah, my pleasure, and I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying your Tesla and your EV experience. Once people get inside and start to drive an EV, whatever EV it is,
Yeah.
typically they don't go back. it is a tremendous experience, cheaper to own, cheaper to maintain in the long run, and just fun to drive.
100%. I think a big thing I've noticed is I've felt, and I won't mention any specific brands of vehicles, but I felt like I was in a luxury vehicle a couple of years ago, and it's been a while since I've rode in that brand of car. And, after driving and getting used to my Tesla, when I go back to getting in one of those cars, it just doesn't feel the same. It almost feels a little bit more clunky. I realized like, oh, wow, there's nothing wrong with the car. I think it was just, like I have a different perspective now from switching to an EV. So I'm definitely going to check you guys out and follow your journey on LinkedIn, especially if I'm looking into taking any long road trips. I want to make sure that I know where all the best EV chargers are.
We're working to bring the best data to you, right? So you're our target audience. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
you've got a new subscriber then. But
All
thank
right.
you so
Awesome.
much again, Bill. There you have it, guys. We will catch you in the next video.